Especially in Japan, there are so many cultural situations where you can use only Japanese. The expressions which we use in those situations cannot be translated into other languages. So being culturally astute helps you a lot. You don't have to hold N1, that is the Japanese language proficiency test level 1, but being able to communicate in Japanese helps tremendously.
こんにちは皆さん。ビジネス Success Japan のポッドキャストへようこそ。Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Business Success Japan podcast. This is your host, Liddy Buchelman. My main goal here is to create an easily accessible resource for those who want to develop Japan-specific communication skills, especially in business. While I don't promise to make you fluent in Japanese, I hope that you will walk away from each episode with a skill, piece of information, or shift in mindset that will help you be more effective in your interactions with Japanese business people. Also, one quick note to let you know about what's been going on recently with the popular new social media app, Clubhouse. It's not only blown up in Japan, but the community of foreigners who work in Japan or with Japanese companies has been growing lately as well. So, if you have an iPhone and are interested in joining in on the conversation, please reach out to me on LinkedIn or email me at businesssuccessjapan@gmail.com to see if I still have some invitations to share. I'm looking forward to seeing you there. Also, a quick reminder to please rate and review the podcast if you enjoy it. It goes a long way to helping others find the podcast and learn more, and it helps me to keep going as an independent creator. So, thanks in advance. In today's episode, I have a conversation with Maya Matsuoka, Assistant Director at the Japan Association of Travel Agencies, or JADA. Maya is a multilingual professional who has worked in Japan for 19 years with extensive experience in the travel industry. She has also recently launched a great new website called Discover Deep Japan, which is a high-quality resource for individuals who want to better understand the Japanese marketplace and what is needed to find success in Japan. Be sure to check out the link in the description of the episode to learn more. And of course, if you are interested in contributing to the website, do not hesitate to reach out to Maya directly. But before we get into the interview, let's go over some Japanese. In the previous episode, we learned the word teishoku. 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 Teishoku is a Japanese set meal, which you'll often encounter in Japanese restaurants. To learn more about the larger significance of this way of eating in Japanese food culture, be sure to check out the previous episode. This episode, I wanted to highlight a word that comes up briefly in the conversation. ごくろうさまです。ごくろうさまです。ごくろうさまです。Gokurou-sama desu is very similar to an extremely important phrase we learned in an earlier episode, otsukare-sama desu. Essentially, you can think of them both as equivalent to you worked hard, good work, or thank you for your hard work in English. However, the difference between these two is important to remember, as it has to do a lot with how formal speech works in Japanese. While both are used frequently in a business context, ご苦労様です can only be used by someone in a higher position than the person that they are speaking to. So if someone is older or has a more senior position in the company, for example, ご苦労様です is completely acceptable. In situations where you're speaking to someone of a relatively higher position in the context, お疲れ様です must be used. So if you are ever unsure which phrase to use in a situation, it's probably best to default to お疲れ様です and save ご苦労様です for times when you're speaking to a junior employee or someone you know is younger than yourself. But without any further delay, let's get into today's interview.
My name is Maya Matsuoka. I was born and raised in Bulgaria in a small border town community. There, everybody knew everybody. Everybody knew my parents. Everybody knew me, of course, and I knew everybody else. I graduated from high school there. And after that, I moved to Sofia, which is the capital of Bulgaria, where I studied first European languages and culture, and then I also changed subjects to tourism. So basically administration, development and management of tourism. And I graduated there. And after that, I came to Japan in 2001.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your history with Japan? Like, why Japan?
Yes. Okay. That's a very easy question to answer. Why Japan? So, well, I married a Japanese guy. So, what could be easier, a better reason to move to Japan? I met my husband in Bulgaria. He was posted to the Japanese embassy there. We worked together on several occasions. We dated there for almost 3 years. We got married and eventually we moved to Japan in 2001. Then after coming to Japan, I didn't speak the language at that time, so we communicated in either in English or in Bulgarian. And it took me several years to learn the language here, but still I tried to, because I come from a country where everybody works, women work, women don't leave their workplaces, they don't quit their jobs after starting a family. So one of my number one things to do when I came to Japan was to look for a job. Of course, it was no easy thing since I didn't speak the language. I had to learn it first. But at the same time, I was lucky actually to find a job with an IT company. So as a back office researcher, and I lived in Japan in Tokyo. Sorry, I lived in Tokyo for 3 years. After that, we moved to Hokkaido. We lived there for 3 years, and then we came back to Tokyo, and we have been here for I don't know how many years already. Almost 16? No, more than 16. So time flies. It's really difficult to keep track of of it. After I came back to Tokyo, I started working for the Japan Association of Travel Agents, which is, basically it is private sector trade organization, which works very closely with the Japanese government. And we represent mostly companies that deal in overseas travel. So they send Japanese tourists to overseas destinations. And during my time in Tokyo, of course, I had my daughter. So I have a daughter who is 7 years old. I have kept working and raising the family. And that's more or less it for the moment. So
Perfect. Thank you for sharing. Has it been a little bit more difficult to work while raising a family in Japan than it may have been back home in Bulgaria?
well, yes and no, because I was really concerned before having my daughter. I was concerned that I wouldn't be able to continue working once I had her. But fortunately, I was given the opportunity to use the maternity leave and also to go back to work after that 1 year. And at the same time, I went back to work and I went back full time. So in a sense, it was a kind of difficult until I got used to it, just doing the two things at the same time. But I think that it wasn't so much more difficult than it would have been in back home. So just like everywhere, you need to get used to it. And of course, in my workplace, my colleagues didn't expect me to work overtime after going back. And that helped a lot. So I could finish on time. I could go to my daughter's that's creches, and pick her up, go home, and do everything, which I needed to do as a mother, spend time with her and so on. So yes, it was a kind of difficult, but not because of the system. It was difficult just to get used to it. And I think it's the same for everybody, not just for me.
It's probably difficult in almost any situation to raise a family while having a career. So,
Indeed, yes, it is. Yeah.
Going back to your work, can you tell us a little bit about some of the differences you see and how Japanese companies within the same industry in Japan interact versus what Westerners might commonly expect with companies that are in competition with each other?
Right. Yes. Well, I come from a small European country, and basically, for several years there while studying. And I have experience from that time, and I have experience, from working in Japan. And one thing which strikes me is, is really a huge difference is that back home, and I think it's more or less the same in other Western cultures, back home, companies are very competitive, and they really show that, competitiveness, and they really compete against each other. So it's very rare to see companies, uniting and working together for common cause. But here in Japan, I work for the Japan Association of Travel Agents, and we have about 1,200 members. So all of them are travel agencies working here in Japan. And it's normal. I mean, they're competitors. But at the same time, when it comes to common goals, which will benefit everybody in the industry, all the companies in the industry, they get together and they work together, they discuss things, they try to find ways to influence, of course, to influence the government, to influence the relative ministries and so on, so that, they can improve their business in the future. So this is one very different thing from what I have seen overseas. This willingness to get over that competitive feeling and to overcome competition when it is for the goal or the common good.
That's very interesting. So how exactly do companies work together for the good of the industry? What does that look like in Japan?
Well, in Japan, there are quite a lot of associations, trade associations in every industry. And in the overseas travel industry specifically, this is the Japan Association of Travel Agents, which, tries to help with the legislation of the industry, also, help to just improve the standards and the values so that the companies, the member companies can offer better services and also can work better. And it happens, in JATA, we've got, of course, we've got committees, they are tasked with different goals. And so they get together every 2 months. They set up the goals and they discuss how, those goals can be achieved. They also have, basically they create roadmaps. There are people appointed to work on every single project so that the association or the projects are completed successfully. And that's how also there is another thing, that being an association whose members work in the field of overseas travel from Japan, we also have that event. It is an yearly event called Tourism Expo Japan, and it is a huge event. It is held every year in autumn. And it is an event which is meant, to bring together professionals from different parts of the world so that the Japanese travel industry can actually have talks with them and work for creating new products with them and, of course, find new ways to expand the business. So one of these things is that, of course, JATA, being one of the organizers, of course, of this event, is the sole organizer also of the Ministerial Roundtable, which is held during the Tourism Expo Japan. So the Ministerial Roundtable is basically financed by the Japan Association of Travel Agents. Not only, of course, but it is. So, and once again, the budget comes from the membership fees of, the member companies here in Japan. So indirectly, those companies, they expect us to help them, promote overseas travel. And this is one of the ways we do it. Well, of course, I have been involved in the organization of this Ministerial Roundtable for 6 years now, and it has been a huge success. So it has also helped the industry move ahead. And yes, we have a committee again there, and so it consists of representatives of the member companies who work together once again, representatives of international universities in Japan and so on. So that's how basically, yes, we move step by step, project by project. So depending on what the situation requires and what should be done at the moment so that, everybody can move ahead.
Yeah, that is a very different approach, but I can see how it ends up working to everybody's benefit in the end. So we're recording this episode at the end of February, but apart from the current controversy due to the coronavirus situation, and I know it's suspended for the most part right now, but what does the Go To Travel campaign show about Japanese tourists and how consumers' behaviors in Japan and expectations might be different from other countries, if at all?
Yes, so that's okay. Another very good question. So as you said, there was a lot of controversy. There is still a lot of controversy regarding the campaign. So as everybody knows, so there was no travel and tourism for several months last year. So basically, domestic travel, inbound travel and outbound travel were brought to almost zero. Of course, it is a huge shock to the industry. So a lot of companies, since the situation continues now, and the Go-To campaign has been suspended for a while. So a lot of companies are actually just struggling to survive. But at the same time, the Go-To campaign showed, let me start first with the goals. It was clear that without the movement of people, the economy was really suffering very, very hard, very, very much. Well, one of the purposes of the Go-To campaign was to get people moving again, and in this way, have them go to the local regions and also and support the local economies there. And also there was also a strategic goal there to manage to maintain the tourist infrastructure, because when there are no tourists, it's very difficult actually to maintain the infrastructure. It is also very difficult to keep the human resources, the human capital motivated, or even to keep those people, the employees within the industry. So that was another major goal, to keep the employees, the staff who have already been trained, to keep them within the industry and not let them go. The campaign was successful while it was running, and it showed that there is a lot of willingness to travel here. People were really eager to move. So for the 6 months from July till December, actually there were about 83 million overnights domestically, which is a huge number, of overnights. And people were willing to travel. People were also willing to observe all the guidelines for safe travel here, because, it wasn't that difficult actually, because every facility had, hand sanitizers installed. In every facility, they required the visitors to wear masks and also to distance physically, so that the risk of infections would be minimized as much as possible. And the people here complied. Nobody was against it. So, I personally traveled with my family a couple of times, and everybody was actually observing all the rules and the guidelines, which was very, very encouraging. But at the same time, it was also obvious that there was a clear change in demographics of the travelers, because before the pandemic, it was mostly the senior travelers who were everywhere all the time. So of course, because they have time, they have the means to travel. But now, since, the COVID-19, poses a higher risk to the senior people, so their numbers have been reduced, and we can see more younger people traveling. So I believe that this trend will continue for a while. Or, of course, the vaccines here in Japan, they have started, rolling out the vaccination programs, but it will take some time to, until the situation settles down. So that for a while, I believe that it will be really the Generation Z and also the millennials who will be the main driving force in domestic travel first. Hopefully, we'll have also the borders open soon so that a lot of people will be able to travel overseas, but we don't know yet. So
we'll just have to wait and see. But yes, I think one of the big distinctions is just the fact that Japanese travelers were so willing to follow the rules that were laid out for safe travel. So that is something that made the situation in Japan a little bit different than what I saw personally in where I'm living right now. So yes, definitely.
I wanted, to add something more. Of course, the travelers here, they were, and they are still willing to observe all the guidelines and, the prescriptions for safe travel. But at the same time, it is also the travel agencies and tour operators who are very eager to offer that environment, safe environment. So we have seen, there is a huge change in the number or the size of the groups in group travel. So in the past, there used to be groups of 40, 50 people, on a tour, one tour. But nowadays, that number has been reduced by half or even more. So that even when people are on buses, they still can sit, and, keep the distance between them. And so it is also another thing. I believe that the industry all over the world has been very careful to create an environment which is considered safe by the travelers. But at the same time here, the attention to detail, the smallest detail when it comes to safety is really, it is overwhelming. But I'm saying this in the good sense of the word, of course. So that, of course, it is the travelers who are careful, but it's also the travel agencies who are always open and very willing to create that safe environment for their customers.
So you alluded to this a little bit, but do you see any long-term changes that are currently happening in the Japanese travel industry? Or do you think things will pretty much go back to normal afterwards?
Well, so that's also another question, a little bit difficult to answer, because we need to keep in mind, when we talk about industry, every industry has to deal with demand and also with supply. So adjust its supply to the demand. And in terms of demand, yes, I think that for a while, the people who will travel, or the majority of people who travel, will consist of younger people, the younger generations. Although the seniors here in Japan, they're really avid travelers and they love traveling. They love traveling domestically. They love traveling internationally. But yes, I guess that, especially when it comes to the senior travelers, the numbers will depend on how safe the destinations they want to visit are. So that is one thing. And these, the safety in those destinations will define any changes, in the numbers of senior travelers. This probably will not be so obvious with younger generations, but still it will be a major factor here. And then when it comes to supply, and the companies which actually prepare the tour products, we need to make the distinction between the two kinds of companies here in Japan. So one of them is the online travel agents, and then the other one is the legacy travel agents. And this pandemic has shown once again that, the trends of digitalization in the industry are very, very strong. Of course, the pandemic has accelerated the trends. And so the legacy travel agencies are actually in quite a difficult situation at the moment, because some of them are not ready for this, not ready yet. And so for them, it will mean that it will be difficult actually to get that number of travelers they used to have before the pandemic because of, how bookings are made. So, online, if we have the younger generations traveling uh, in the future, mostly in the future, so those generations, they are used to making their bookings online and they are more used to using online travel agencies. So this really poses a threat to the legacy travel agents here. And if they don't adjust, it will be quite difficult to survive. But also, on the other hand, this also creates an opportunity for smaller travel agencies, which deal mostly in specialized tours. So I believe that for them, because they offer very specific, very niche services, and they have, in a sense, limited clientele. But that clientele is there. They have nurtured the customers, and so they are very loyal customers. So such niche travel agencies they will flourish. Their business will flourish after the pandemic is over. So we'll see. It's really very difficult now to say what will happen. One thing is sure that, of course, special interest tours and independent travelers will continue to increase. But at the same time, in the short term after the pandemic, we may see a spike in the number of small group tours organized by travel agencies. Because at the moment, there is a lot of talk about entirely managed tours. And then such entirely managed tours, the term implies a small number of travelers on one tour where everything is arranged and all the details are, decided beforehand, so that every single detail along the way will most probably be controlled by a tour coordinator on the tour. So in the short term, until things settle, we will see probably an increase in this kind of tours. And this will be maybe for a year or two. And after that, things will gradually start returning back to normal. But these are just, my observations, and things may change, of course. And we'll see. We'll see.
Of course, we'll just have to wait and see. But had these legacy agencies already been taking steps to appeal a bit more to the younger generations just because the nature of the demographics in Japan? Or had they kind of been taking a little bit more time with it up until now?
That's a great question because this has been actually the challenge for many of them for quite some time now, for several years. And I would say that it's a little bit late now to expect, to regain the favor of the millennials. Because, yes, the millennials are very independent and they use, online services all the time. And they don't like travel agencies to tell them where to go and what to do. And then, yes, if we look at this from a different angle, it's true. The travel agencies have failed to offer products which are attractive to those millennials. So yes, they're taking their time. Definitely, the pandemic is a great chance for such travel agencies just to, to think about what is really attractive for the millennials. But at the same time, of course, I'm not saying that 100% of those travel agencies have failed to do this, but a very big part have actually. Yes, some of them, like let's say, among the five biggest ones, they have divisions, they have teams working, on tours, on developing tours for younger generations, but it is still a very, very a new trend anyway. Hopefully it will grow. But most of the travel agencies are taking their time with this. And so we'll see what happens once again. I hope that they manage to create tours which attract younger generations. But at the same time, we should not forget that about 30% of the Japanese population is senior. So this is also a huge market. And it is quite difficult to blame, many of the travel agencies for choosing, to concentrate on this huge market at the same time. Well, so let's see what happens.
Right. If you can keep doing more or less the same thing you have been doing, capture 30% of the market that has the most free time and the most disposable income, that's a pretty good situation to be in. So yeah, I can't really blame them, I guess. Yeah.
Indeed, yes.
So you mentioned special interest tours. Would those kind of niche tours probably tend to go deeper into specific locations rather than moving around a lot like maybe more traditional ones? Is that kind of what you see coming up?
Yes, that's what I see, and it will be, they could be hobby based or they could be destination based. So, but the trend is that, in the past, Japanese overseas travelers used to go around several destinations in a week. Just visit 3 or 4 countries in 1 week or so. This trend had been changing even before the pandemic. So, city stays were becoming more popular, and also hobby-based tours were becoming more popular. And now I think that probably, these trends will be accelerated after the pandemic, and there will be not only in Japan, all over the world, but there will be this willingness to go out of the city, be closer to nature, where there aren't so many people, and you don't have to socialize that much, but you can still relax, you can still feel the atmosphere of the place, the culture of the place, and still communicate with the local people there and get that very specific, very unique experience. So yes, these trends, they were here even before the pandemic, but I think that they will go even deeper, they will become stronger. So let's see what happens once again. I say this a lot nowadays, let's see what happens, because things have been changing and not changing at the same time. And it's really difficult to make predictions and being sure that those predictions will actually be realized. So, but that's how things are.
Can speculate, but we don't really know a whole lot for sure right now. So we're just doing the best we can, I guess.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing your insights into the market and what you think is going to happen. I think it's very interesting. But now, completely shifting gears,
Okay.
I wanted to ask you about why you think it's important for people to do business in the Japanese language specifically if they're working in Japan.
Right. Yes, that's a very good question too. Thank you for asking it. So I usually say that, of course, you can work in Japan even if you don't speak the language. But the quality of your work and the quality of the communication with your colleagues and partners and counterparts will not be so good if you don't speak the language, at least, at the conversational level. And so I think it is important for several reasons. So my list is not exhaustive, but I'll just tell you which the most important reasons are, in my opinion, of course. So the first one is that nowadays in Japan, we have many, many more people speaking foreign languages, and of course English among them, compared to, let's say, 20 years ago or 10 years ago, which is a good thing. But still, the majority of the population and the majority of business persons here, they either don't speak a foreign language, or even if they do, they feel more comfortable communicating in Japanese. So many people still shy away from speaking a foreign language. So if you can communicate with them in Japanese, it will just make your life so much easier, and their life of course, their life will be so much easier, which will, of course, facilitate, the acceptance, the mutual acceptance, and also the work, the work you do together. And then, of course, another reason for speaking the language, why it is important to speak, is that by learning Japanese, you actually learn the culture. I mean, it's really a kind of a far-fetched, probably sounds like a far-fetched statement, but I believe that every language reflects the culture of that country or of that, let's say, ethnic group or nationality. So, and especially in Japan, there are so many cultural situations where you can use only Japanese. I mean, the expressions which we use in those situations cannot be translated into other languages. And knowing these are, cultural sensitivities, and then they transpire into the business culture too. And so being culturally astute helps you a lot, really a lot, to work well, to work smoothly in Japan. Also, well, communicate well, because communication comes always first. So that's why I believe it is important to speak the language when you work in Japan or with Japan. Of course, once again, I would like to say that you don't have to hold N1, that is the Japanese language proficiency test level 1 certificate, but being able to communicate in Japanese helps tremendously.
Yeah, I think that's a very good perspective to have. It can be easy to forget how closely linked language and culture is if you are a native English speaker, just because English is spoken as a first language in so many different cultures. But it definitely is true, especially in more homogenous countries, in smaller countries, in countries where their only language is the native language. So yes, I definitely agree with how important it is to speak the language to understand the culture and vice versa.
Indeed, yes, that's one of the most important things. I remember when I came to Japan and I didn't speak the language, and I started, studying it. So I had a lot of difficulty because of stress, and also because of other things, of course. But so after I became able to communicate a little bit, I stopped learning it, and then at some point, so my husband was like, well, if you really want to work for a Japanese company, you have to continue studying it. So because it will help you. And I was like, oh, come on, this is just a test. So because he was very insistent that I had to pass the test. And I was like, this is just a paper, it is just a test. But he said, yeah, it is just a test, but it is important because it can prove, that you have the minimal level of language proficiency. So thanks to him, I continued studying and eventually managed, to get that certificate, which wasn't easy, but it was quite interesting and a very exciting journey too. So yes, it is important for me because I come from a country where Bulgarian is the only, that's the official language. And I grew up close to the border with two other countries, but our languages there are so close that they're like dialects. So I never actually got, that feeling that, speaking a different language actually opens the door to a different culture. It happened after I came to Japan. So because everything here was so different. And as I said earlier, there are just situations in which you can use only Japanese, and there are no expressions in any other languages. So I remember once we were going out somewhere, and there was a person working, a construction worker, doing some work in front of the building we lived in. And then my husband said, "Goくろうさまです." And I was like, what's this? You don't know this person first. Of course, you can always say hello to a person who you don't know. But at the same time, "ごくろうさまです," what does it mean? And so it was a kind of, he gave me an explanation, that it is a way to show appreciation to what the other person, that the worker, is doing, so which is very good. But in my language, in Bulgarian, we don't have anything which can, translate even remotely, showing appreciation to the other persons. Of course, we can always say thank you, but that's it. It's finished. So, and I think thatごくろうさまですand also お疲れ様です, so they're synonymous anyway, but so it's, they go to a little bit deeper. So it's not just thank you, it's, more like, showing how you appreciate the other person's time and work and everything. So this is just only one example, but there are many like this. That's why, I think that it's very important to be acquainted with such things when you come to Japan, and especially when you work with Japanese companies.
And it's such a small thing. It seems insignificant, but it's so foundational to Japanese culture. And then once you've been in Japan for a while, or you're very familiar with Japanese, and you try to explain it to somebody who has no familiarity with Japan, you can kind of just see their faces glaze over, like, what are you talking about? This doesn't make any sense. But yeah, the more you can learn the language, the more a lot of other things fall into place in Japan.
Yes. And you definitely need somebody who can explain those things to you. So yes, because learning the language opens the door into the culture, but at the same time, you need some more explanation about the culture too. Yes.
So as a foreign worker in a Japanese company, are you aware of any other unique challenges or opportunities that come to mind when you think about people in a situation like you?
Wow. Okay. There is a mountain of challenges and there is a mountain of opportunities. So, well, I think that nowadays, with everybody knows that working full time for a Japanese company can be very challenging for everybody, because you are expected, to be there 100% of the time. You're expected to be there, during the day, and also to socialize with your colleagues after the end of the working hours. But it's even more challenging for women, of course, because, going drinking with your colleagues feels good sometimes, let's say once or twice a week. But when it happens more often, it's really tiring. And especially if you have a family, it is a kind of, something you wouldn't like to do. So spending time with your kids and, with the family, it feels much more important most of the time than going drinking. But at the same time here, it's like that nomikai culture. It is such a big part of the business culture in Japan that you just cannot skip the nomikais, the parties there, because a lot of information is exchanged there, a lot of things happen there too. But also there is another thing which I find quite challenging. When you start working for a Japanese company, the job description you have is very vague. So yes, it is very vague. And of course, it's very difficult, to get from the get-go to understand the responsibilities you have for in that position. Of course, there are basic responsibilities, like you need to do what your boss tells you, and you need to be there available for your coworkers, for everybody in the company. But at the same time, that vagueness of the job description, creates really a huge challenge, because sometimes, especially if you're new to the company, you just wonder, what am I supposed to do? And there is very little verbal explanation of such things. So I think that the greatest challenge here is this verbal versus non-verbal communication. And so it comes down, of course, it is very obvious when you first come to a company, but here the culture is like, it is context rich. Well, the non-verbal communication is much more prevalent than the verbal communication. So, and when you start somewhere or when you join a new team, a new community, or a new company, so basically you're expected to observe and learn. And that is really difficult because very few people tell you should do this and you should do that. You just observe what the people around you do and you follow, you do the same. So, and of course, if you make a mistake, then somebody comes and tells you, oh, you shouldn't have done this. So, which is kind of post factum, right? So I think that back in Bulgaria, it's the other way around. When you enter a company, they tell you, you're responsible for this, and this. So this is your job, do it. If you want to do something more, talk with your manager and we'll see. But here there is nothing like that. So this is really very difficult. And it's also a lot of Japanese people talk about the difficulty, of, just picking up the atmosphere, picking up the mood in a room, let's say a meeting room. So this has become a phrase used very often nowadays, that is kuki o yomu, right? So, but it's difficult even for some Japanese people, let alone for foreigners. I mean, we are so used to being told, what our responsibilities are. Yes, and what we are supposed to do, expected to do, or not to do, and so. But here, oh my, it's really, really difficult. So, I mean, developing that sensibility is very difficult for foreigners, I think, in the beginning. Once you learn, that there are certain things which are allowed and not allowed, it becomes easier. And of course, one good thing is that in every organization, there is always a person who is willing to tell you things if you ask them. Of course, if you ask them. If you don't ask, there will be very few people, just volunteering to give you information. But if you ask, then there is always somebody who can help you with this. So yes, this is a challenge, but I think that in order to overcome it, so you need to just be open and never hesitate to ask. So don't worry about anything. People know that you're a foreigner, and so you don't know things. They don't expect you to behave 100% as a Japanese person. So it helps a lot. Asking questions helps a lot.
Yeah, that's great advice. Could you please tell us about your new project, Japan Expert Insights?
Oh, yes. Thank you very much for bringing it up. So this is basically, it's a project which I started thinking about last year in October. And basically at the moment it is in the shape of a website, but I'm trying to create a platform where professionals who have lived and worked in Japan or with Japan can share their knowledge about Japan as a business place or business environment. So because these people, they have been successful here, they have worked here for 10, 15, 20 and more years, and they know how Japan as a corporate environment works. And they know the corporate culture, they know the public affairs here, they know how the business moves. So I have asked such people to share their insights, and they have agreed. And so Japan Expert Insights is basically a place where everybody who wants to know a little bit more about the Japanese business environment can go there and search for information. The site is still in its very beginning, and I'm developing it. It will be growing in the future, of course, as I'm still looking for experts who are willing to share their insights there. And I really hope that the information there will help people who want to work in Japan or who want to work with Japanese organizations learn and learn how things are done here and be more open-minded so that they can succeed in their future business.
Yeah, I'm personally excited to see where it goes because obviously our missions align very closely. But it will definitely be nice as somebody who has experience trying to do research about Japanese business culture to have a definitive source instead of just blindly typing in Google, having to check a few different websites to make sure they say roughly the same thing. So I'm looking forward to see where Japan Expert Insights goes in the future.
Well, me too, actually, because it's obviously a living thing and the ecosystem changes all the time. Of course, we need to adjust to it, but there are, of course, some basic principles which stay more or less the same. So let's see. I'm very excited about it, and I'm committed to growing it. So let's see how it goes. And I'm very much looking forward to collaborating with you on it.
Yes,
So
me too.
yes, yes.
Just to kind of start winding things down for today, could you please share an example that you have of a communication breakdown due to differences in culture?
That's a difficult question. Well, yes, quite a few, but it's really difficult to just choose one of them because it has happened quite a lot. And yeah, one thing it's more like, well, probably it goes a little bit into a different direction. What happens is that, well, in my work, I work with national tourism organizations of other countries. And basically, those organizations, they are willing to attract the Japanese visitors, so they want to promote themselves here in Japan. And what happens is that when they communicate with, with the Japanese organization, well, let's say a Japanese travel agency, so those organizations, they really want to promote places within the country which are on the agenda of their own government. And so, like, let's say they want to promote ski resorts in Japan. But Japanese people are not really interested in going overseas for skiing. So this is, and when, well, basically, when Japanese person writes in English and says, they never say we don't want to promote that because of something. They usually avoid this no, straightforward no, and they say, well, we would like to see other attractions, let's say like museums, for example. So these cultural differences, but in Western cultures, if you don't hear a straight no, so it's not no for you. You still keep pushing for the same thing, right? And then here, this avoidance of saying no actually doesn't help very much. So, and quite a few times, the communication or just well, it has been stalled, let's say, because one side expects and wants and expects something, and the other side is not, let's say, not able or not willing. It's not about willingness, but not able actually uh, to express how it feels or what it wants. So yes, it happens quite often, and that's why it is important, that well, we try to understand how business communication works in different cultures. And once again, it comes to when you speak a language, you basically also become more fluent in cultural situations, and you become to understand cultural sensitivities and ways of saying things. So yeah, it happens sometimes, when a Japanese person writes in English, they still don't say no. They keep, just communicating in the typical Japanese way, and only the words are English, but otherwise everything behind them is Japanese. So this is one example. There are many others, but still.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's definitely a huge one to keep in mind, that even if you're speaking in English, it may not be speaking your culture. They may still be speaking Japanese culture.
Indeed,
So
yes.
definitely
Yes.
something to be aware of.
Yes.
So if you were chatting with somebody who was going to Japan for business and you only had time to teach them one thing about the country or the culture before they came, what would you choose to teach them?
I'm sorry, I'm going to say what everybody already knows. Japan is very unique. And the logic according to which everything here works is different from the rest of the world. That's why you should leave your biases at home. Just come here open-minded and observe, ask, and learn so that you can understand how unique this culture is and you can become more well-versed in different cultural situations because, well, basically the traditional culture in Japan is the one which transpires into the business culture. And that's why it is important that you forget expectations, you leave your expectations at home and come here and start, to learn from zero.
Come to Japan with the beginner's mind.
Yes,
that'll take you
indeed.
very far.
Absolutely. Yes.
Mhm. So did we get to cover everything that you wanted to talk about today? Is there anything else you wanted to mention before we wrapped things up?
I think this is more or less all. So, yeah, I just want to say thank you for this opportunity. I'm really happy that I had the chance to talk with you and share some of the things, some of my feelings and some of my thoughts here.
Thank you so much for your time. I hope that you enjoyed today's conversation, and please be sure to check out the links in the description of the episode to learn more about Maya Matsuoka and her new website, Discover Deep Japan. If you would like to share your own insights into doing business in Japan, be sure to reach out to Maya directly as well. If you enjoyed today's episode, please go ahead and share it with a friend, colleague, or connection on LinkedIn to help spread the messages and information shared in the podcast. And please remember to go ahead and subscribe and leave a review and rating if you enjoy the podcast. Or feel free to email me at businesssuccessjapan@gmail.com if you have any other questions, comments, or suggestions for future episodes or interview topics. Also, be sure to reach out if you would like to contribute as a guest on the podcast to share your own cultural insights into doing business in Japan. If you'd like to leave a voice message, you can find a link to do so in the description as well. But for now, remember that the more you learn, the more confident you will become as you explore all of the opportunities Japan has to offer you. Until next time, mata kondo.